The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing was already tense. The room buzzed with journalists, staffers, and curious viewers watching the live broadcast across the country. The topic: voting rights and judicial accountability. But everyone knew the real fireworks would come from the personalities on the panel, particularly Senator J.D. Vance and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, invited as a guest expert witness. From the moment Jasmine Crockett walked into the chamber, there was an undeniable shift in energy. Dressed in a sleek navy suit and heels that clicked with confidence, she took her seat across from Vance with a calm composure. The Ohio senator, known for his sharp tongue and blunt remarks, looked ready to challenge every word that came out of her mouth. J.D. Vance leaned into his microphone, voice dripping with smugness. "Congresswoman Crockett, you seem more focused on viral moments than serious legislation. Do you actually read the bills you speak on, or do you just wait for your staff to tweet something clever?" The crowd chuckled. Some even clapped. Jasmine didn't flinch. She slowly turned toward him with a raised eyebrow, then smiled faintly. The room fell quiet. You could almost hear the cameras zooming in. She leaned into her mic and replied, voice calm and piercing, "Senator Vance, I read the Constitution, maybe you should start there before lecturing anyone about serious legislation." The room erupted. Laughter, claps, gasps. Even a few staffers at the back couldn't hide their grins. Vance's face flushed as he adjusted his tie, clearly caught off guard by the sharpness of her comeback. The clip would go viral within minutes, but inside that chamber, everyone already knew, Jasmine Crockett had just stolen the show. J.D. Vance tried to regain control, but the noise in the chamber hadn't fully settled. The chair had to gavel the room twice to bring order. Even the stenographer seemed slightly amused, glancing up from her keyboard. Cameras panned to Vance, who gave a tight-lipped smile, clearly irritated, but trying to mask it. He leaned forward again, this time with a bit more edge. "Well, Congresswoman, if you're done reciting slogans, maybe we can have an actual discussion about the consequences of soft-on-crime policies your party continues to push." Jasmine didn't blink. She sat back in her chair, her hands calmly folded in front of her. "Soft on crime?" she echoed. "Senator, you're from a state that tried to pass a law letting armed teachers patrol schools like we're in the Wild West. If that's your idea of justice, I'll stick with my slogans." A few gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras caught Senator Cory Booker biting his lip to hide a smirk. J.D. Vance shifted uncomfortably. "You're twisting the facts." Jasmine leaned in, voice now firmer. "No, I'm just not letting you rewrite them." The tension in the room was electric. Everyone knew, this wasn't just a debate. It was a takedown in real time. Crockett wasn't playing defense. She was rewriting the entire script of the hearing, one sharp line at a time. J.D. Vance adjusted his papers and chuckled awkwardly, clearly trying to reset the dynamic. "Well, Congresswoman, if we're comparing state policies, maybe you can explain why your district is dealing with record crime rates under your watch." The jab was personal. A calculated move. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned forward slightly, her voice low but clear, the kind that made even the sound crew sit up straight. "Let me explain something to you, Senator," she said. "Crime isn't a talking point, it's a symptom. And while you're busy weaponizing it for cable news clips, I'm the one meeting with families, working with local leaders, and fighting for real solutions you keep voting against." A stunned silence fell over the room. Then she delivered the line that would blow the lid off the entire hearing: "You don't get to mock the fire when you're the one holding the match." For a moment, J.D. Vance didn't move. His mouth parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. The audience gasped, then burst into applause. Loud, sustained applause. Even some senators, across the aisle, were clearly impressed. Social media exploded. Phones buzzed on silent mode as reporters tweeted furiously. Clips were already being clipped and posted by staffers. Jasmine Crockett had just shut him down, and she'd done it with one sentence. As the applause finally died down, the committee chair banged the gavel once more, half smiling as he asked the room to settle. But the energy was impossible to contain. The hearing, once expected to be a typical partisan volley, had turned into must-see television, all because Jasmine Crockett had flipped the narrative. J.D. Vance tried to continue, his voice now noticeably more restrained. Well, that was colorful. But let's get back to the data. But the damage had been done. Crockett had already exposed his approach as shallow, focused more on optics than outcomes. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to interrupt. Her calm dismantling of his arguments had landed with the power of a knockout punch. And she wasn't finished. I'd love to talk data, she said, voice steady. Let's talk about how your voting record consistently undermines resources for mental health, community policing, and economic development. You cherry-pick crime stats but block the solutions that would fix them. You can't defund the cure and then complain about the symptoms. That line hit hard. Cameras captured the visible discomfort on Vance's face as he reached for his water glass. His hands, previously poised and confident, now fumbled slightly. Jasmine glanced around the room, not arrogantly, but with the quiet awareness of someone who knew she had taken control of the moment. The crowd wasn't just watching now. They were hanging on her every word. J.D. Vance seemed to realize that engaging further would only dig him deeper. But he attempted one last pivot. Well, I suppose we'll just have to agree to disagree, Congresswoman, he said, trying to sound diplomatic. At the end of the day, we both want what's best for our communities, even if we see the path differently. Jasmine gave a polite nod but didn't let the moment slide into a safe landing. That's the problem, Senator, she replied, voice calm but cutting. You want what looks best. I want what works best. Gasps echoed again. A few in the audience actually stood up in applause. The chair tried to maintain control, but it was clear, this was no longer a policy discussion. It had become a masterclass in poise, substance, and strategy. J.D. Vance sat back, visibly frustrated but forced to maintain composure. His earlier smugness had evaporated completely. And Crockett? She remained poised, her expression unreadable but her presence undeniable. Reporters in the press section were already whispering among themselves, did she just end his argument with that line? She didn't just end it. She buried it. Backstage, a producer from one of the major networks mouthed to her assistant, clip that. Now. That's going viral in 10 minutes. And she was right. As the hearing moved on to other speakers, the spotlight stubbornly lingered on Jasmine Crockett. Senators who had initially planned to grill her now treaded carefully, recalibrating their tone and questions. No one wanted to become the next viral casualty. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance sat unusually silent, his notes untouched, his jaw set, eyes focused straight ahead. The crowd had shifted its attention, and the narrative had flipped. What was supposed to be his platform to challenge Crockett had become a stage for his own undoing. Back on social media, Crockett's "You don't get to mock the fire when you're the one holding the match" quote was trending on every major platform. Hashtags like hashtag Crockett shuts it down and hashtag VanceOwn surged within minutes. Political commentators across the spectrum were already reacting live. She didn't just respond, one analyst on cable news declared. She outclassed him, outargued him, and outsmarted him. That was surgical. Back in the hearing room, Jasmine remained composed, scribbling notes, listening to others speak, but she had already made her point. She didn't gloat. She didn't grandstand. She let the moment speak for itself. The chairman cleared his throat and addressed her again. Congresswoman Crockett, would you care to offer a closing statement? She glanced up, smiled gently, and replied, I think the record speaks for itself, Mr. Chairman. The audience loved it. A fresh round of applause broke out. And just like that, Jasmine Crockett had turned a routine committee hearing into a viral political legend, live and unfiltered. Outside the chamber, reporters swarmed the hallway, eager to catch a word with Jasmine Crockett. Microphones were thrust forward, cameras rolling non-stop, and questions fired from every angle. "Congresswoman, did you anticipate that exchange with Senator Vance? Was that line rehearsed or spontaneous? Do you think this changes your national profile?" Jasmine paused, smiled politely, and gave a cool response. "I came here to speak truth, not to trend. But if the truth does trend, I'll take it." That line landed just as powerfully as the one inside. It was clipped instantly by news crews, edited with dramatic music, and shared with captions like, "Crockett, unbothered. Unmatched. Unapologetic." Meanwhile, J.D. Vance quietly exited through a side door, avoiding the press altogether. His staff moved quickly, shielding him from further questions. Internally, his team was already doing damage control, drafting statements, shifting the narrative, trying to redirect attention. But it was too late. Cable news played the moment on repeat. Talk shows invited legal and political analysts to dissect her performance. Influencers, commentators, even celebrities began weighing in online. Memes exploded. Fan edits surfaced. One clip zoomed dramatically into Vance's face at the exact moment Crockett delivered her "mock the fire" line. Another showed her walking out of the chamber in slow motion with the caption, "When you end a career before lunch." She hadn't just survived the hearing. She had dominated it. By the end of the day, Jasmine Crockett's name was on every political outlet's homepage. Editorials praised her clarity, presence, and precision. Even those who disagreed with her politics admitted, she'd owned the moment with intellect, not insults. Back in her office, her team was stunned by the surge in support. "Your follower count just jumped by 200,000, her aide said, eyes wide as she stared at the analytics dashboard. "You've got endorsements pouring in. Even folks from swing states are reposting the clip." Jasmine stayed focused, calmly sipping tea as messages flooded her phone, congratulations from colleagues, invitations from national media, even cautious praise from a few Republicans who admired her composure. She finally glanced up from her screen. "This isn't about going viral," she said quietly. "It's about showing people that we don't have to shout to be heard. We just have to be right, and unafraid." Elsewhere, J.D. Vance was nowhere to be seen. His official X, Twitter, account posted a lukewarm recap of the hearing, carefully omitting Jasmine's name. But users in the comments weren't buying it. "She cooked you in 30 seconds, one wrote. "You brought a soundbite, she brought facts. Respectfully, never try that again." Political insiders were already whispering, Jasmine Crockett had just stepped into the national spotlight in a way few politicians ever do, not through controversy, but through command. And the nation? It was watching closely. The following morning, Jasmine Crockett woke up to a full media blitz. Her phone buzzed non-stop with interview requests, from CNN, MSNBC, even a few right-leaning outlets wanting her reaction to the moment that shook the hearing. Late-night hosts had picked up the story, too. One joked, J.D. Vance brought a notepad. Jasmine Crockett brought a mic drop. But beyond the jokes and memes, there was a deeper shift happening. Voters, especially young ones, were responding not just to her words, but to what she represented: unapologetic confidence, clarity of purpose, and a refusal to be talked down to. In Capitol Hill circles, the ripple effect was immediate. "She's not just a rising star," one strategist said. "She just rewrote the playbook for how to handle political bullies in real time, with facts, not fury." Meanwhile, the hearing transcript was already being studied by commentators and legal scholars. The moment she said, "You don't get to mock the fire when you're the one holding the match," was quoted in op-eds, shared in group chats, and even printed on T-shirts within 24 hours. Back in her district, support surged. Community leaders, activists, and everyday citizens flooded her office with calls of support. "She showed the world what leadership looks like," one local radio host said. "Not just for her constituents, for the whole country." Jasmine didn't gloat. She stayed on message. But inside, she knew, something had shifted. That weekend, Jasmine Crockett appeared on Face the Nation. Calm, articulate, and precise, she dismantled every attempt to label her performance as a viral stunt. "I didn't show up to create a moment," she said, looking directly into the camera. "I showed up to demand accountability, and I won't apologize if the truth resonates louder than expected." Clips from the interview were shared across all platforms. One moment, where she addressed the disconnect between performative politics and real people's struggles, was hailed as the most honest minute of TV all week. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance's team remained largely silent. Behind closed doors, aides scrambled to minimize the fallout. Donors were asking questions. Some even paused contributions, concerned that he'd lost control of the narrative, and worse, lost to someone who wasn't even a full committee member. Inside political circles, speculation began to swirl. Is Crockett the future of the Democratic Party? Could she take on statewide office? Will she headline a keynote address? One senator was overheard saying in the hallway, "I wouldn't want to be on the other end of her questioning, not if I'm bluffing." By now, even her critics were starting to frame their opposition more carefully. No one wanted to be the next one publicly dismantled in a room full of cameras, by someone who didn't need to shout, just to speak plainly and boldly. Back in her district, Jasmine Crockett returned to work as usual, visiting schools, holding community town halls, and checking in on local small business programs. But everything had changed. Her constituents greeted her not just as their representative, but as a national voice. At one event, a young college student nervously approached her. "Congresswoman. I watched that hearing 3 times, she said. "I've never seen someone talk like that and actually win in the room. You made me feel like we matter." Jasmine smiled warmly and put a hand on her shoulder. "You do matter," she replied. "That's why I do what I do. Not for moments, but for people." It wasn't just performance. It was connection. Meanwhile, a political movement quietly started to form around her. Grassroots organizers began holding Crockett Watch parties, where young voters and activists gathered to analyze her speeches, strategize voter outreach, and share how to engage more confidently in political discussions. A week after the hearing, a poll dropped. It asked voters who they believed was most in touch with the concerns of everyday Americans. Jasmine Crockett ranked higher than half the Senate. J.D. Vance. His numbers dipped, especially among independents. The message was clear: authenticity wasn't just respected, it was craved. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine Crockett's moment with J.D. Vance became more than just a political flashpoint, it became a defining moment of a new political era. Pundits called it the line that shifted the room. Activists called it a masterclass in fearless leadership. And her supporters? They just called it the truth. When asked months later how she crafted such a devastatingly effective response, Jasmine simply said, "I wasn't trying to go viral. I was trying to be honest, and people are hungry for honesty." The exchange was studied in political science classes. It was replayed in media training seminars. And it marked the rise of a figure who didn't just speak, she resonated. As for J.D. Vance, he quietly adjusted his public approach, taking fewer personal swipes and sticking more closely to policy talking points. Whether he admitted it or not, the message had been received loud and clear. Back on Capitol Hill, Jasmine Crockett continued doing what she always had, fighting for her district, showing up prepared, and refusing to be intimidated by titles or tactics. And every time she walked into a hearing room after that day, a certain hush fell. Not out of fear. Out of respect. Because everyone remembered the moment one woman, with one line, shut it all down, and the crowd exploded.